welcome back to the SBP Podcast Mobile Filmmaking. You're listening to episode 91, and I'm your host, Susie Botello. Happy holidays to our friends from San Diego and around the world. I wish you the very best during this season. In this episode, we bring you to the UK to talk to our new friend, James Smith. If you listened to our previous episode, episode 90, Caroline Spence and I discussed two feature films entirely shot on smartphones and the many twists and turns that she and her partner experienced. On this episode, we meet James Smith, who was behind the camera for both of those two films. We had a very thorough conversation about the differences and the similarities between traditional and smartphone camera filmmaking. Hey everybody, welcome to the SBP Podcast. I want to bring you to the UK. If you remember our last podcast, we spoke with Caroline Spence, and Caroline spoke about two feature films that were shot with smartphones. And right now, I am speaking to the person behind the camera, James Smith in the UK. James, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. As well as can be expected under the circumstances.
Yeah, why don't you, just because for historical documentation purposes, just briefly share what is going on in your part of the woods there.
Well, I'm in Leicestershire, which is right in the bang in the middle of England, and this was actually one of the places that was worse affected by the pandemic. But recently, the virus seems to have spread further south to southeast into London and surrounding areas, and mutated, or there's another variant. So there's a lot of information in the news that we're trying to work out at the moment. So it's pretty scary, I'd say.
Yeah, well, I hope that we can bring you and our listeners away from the madness of everything that is going on around the world right now. People are listening to this, according to the statistics, 16 different countries, James.
Really? They're listening into 16 different countries? Well, that's amazing, isn't it? I won't be able to fly to any of those countries probably at the moment because they've blocked all the airports. But no, I think the podcast is going really well, isn't it? I certainly enjoyed the last one with Caroline, and it's great. I think that I'm not sure there's one in Britain for mobile phone, filmmaking with phones, but there should be, I think.
Well, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to go ahead and tell you to go ahead and get that ball rolling.
Just to add to the things I'm doing at the moment, that'd be good.
Right. I know that when you listened to Caroline's last episode, and for our listeners, that was episode 90, that it inspired you both, and maybe it had a little bit of pushing to do with me, pushing a little bit, that I really would love for you guys to make another film with your smartphone. Are you going? I'm going to put you on the spot here in public. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah, go on. It's interesting actually how these things work because, as explained in Caroline's podcast, I was never really a big advocate of mobile phone making, and I'm not sure why really. I think I was stuck in the DSLR mode with the lenses that you can change on those cameras and that way of working. Because originally I'd come from stills photography. So I think gradually, Caroline persuaded me to have a go. And in fact, this was during a shoot that was aborted for a film called Cyberlante. The first version, if you like, of the film was aborted because we had problems with the crew, who some members kind of disappeared on us just at the last moment. So Caroline said, well, why don't get a film and make the film anyway, a phone and make the film anyway. And that's what we ended up doing. So that's how I got into that. And now it's opened other doors in that we shot another film called Surveilled last year, currently in post-production. And now you're persuading me to make another one, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, filmmakers got to make films.
Yes, I think that is very true, actually. And when we're not making films, when we haven't got a shoot planned, it kind of gets a bit worrying. And certainly in this pandemic, you've still got to find a way to make the film. Indeed, people have been making films with the Zoom software, or in under different circumstances in a more contained way. So in a way, we're kind of ideally set up to do something like that. But leading on to that. We've got a film called, shall I say, it's The Thinker, which we've been working on for a while. Yeah. It was originally set in Spain, but we're kind of looking at the idea of maybe filming that in your neck of the woods with a phone. But, we're kind of, this came about because of your podcast, your discussions, and this is how things evolve, isn't it? You get inspired, you talk about it, and indie filmmakers find a way of making a film in a different way,
Yeah, there's one thing that I've noticed through all the time that I've spent talking to people about mobile filmmaking is that filmmakers, when it comes to mobile filmmaking, filmmakers inspire themselves just by doing it and talking about it and sharing their experience with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's like any art form, really. It's no good playing the banjo or the flute in your room. You've got to mix with other musicians and then get your band together, haven't you? And certainly with filmmaking, you need to listen. I mean, we listen to your podcast and various blogs and things like that as with others, and read magazine articles and that kind of thing online and in print form, actually. And you just keep up with what's going on. And I think I was listening to a podcast recently whereby a film promoter was saying that indie filmmakers really need to do that. It's amazing how many people don't keep up with what's out there. So I guess it's a way of keeping up with the trends, also technology, because in this sector, your sector, the mobile film thing, it's moving pretty quickly. And I tend to follow Twitter quite a lot because you can pick up the latest snippets on exactly what's happening in the technology and how phones are being used in that context.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's share a little bit about James with our listeners. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about your background with our listeners, just to give them a clearer picture of where you're coming from and why you're on this journey of making films. Like, what brought you here?
Yeah, I guess I'm one of the mavericks, or sort of different kind of filmmakers, in that I wasn't formally trained in any way. So originally I studied software in college, not too far from where I am now in Leicester. And I kind of did, I then went on to work in offices, basically a computer desk job, I guess you'd call it, where I was writing programs and doing various technical stuff like that. But it didn't really suit me. And after a couple of years in a permanent job, I then went freelance, and then was on the road for many years, just using the industry to fuel my other interests, which were photography, travel, and outdoor sports generally. So I was kind of not too happy with my life in a career sense. But my mother was running a overseas property business at the time in Spain, and I started doing photography for her website, actually. And it's little things like that change direction. If I rewind the clock, I can almost see my life changing, in that I was, unbeknown to me at the time, it was changing because I was doing more creative stuff, traveling, using these photographs to create websites, and then it developed on into getting involved in video. There was the video revolution I think it was around, I don't know, 2004, 2007, Caroline and I got together and we decided we were suddenly going to become TV documentarians, or whatever you call it. Caroline was doing presenting and I was operating these little video cameras. And then we started doing, we couldn't make a break into the television market. And very, very difficult, of course. And it's not a sector I was completely happy with, a little bit like software. So we were just doing things to make ends meet, really, business videos, little commercial videos and that kind of stuff. And eventually we started making our own documentaries, for which we had screenings, and we were able to sell DVDs and do our own stuff, basically, rather than become, subservient to a large television organisation, which really was the kind of thing, that permanent employment wasn't really something we wanted to do. It was something we wanted to get away from originally anyway. And so finally, then what happened was we thought, well, we're very interested in feature films. Caroline was an excellent writer, has always been writing, and started developing screenplays. So we shot a few short films, or one short film, I think. And then Caroline started developing feature-length screenplays, and the rest kind of has evolved over the last, I'd say, 10 years into using the latest, affordable technology to, produce these indie films that you'll see on our website now. And it's been, I simplify really, but it's been quite a story, traumatic in places.
How did you meet the people that have been working with you with these actual films?
A lot of it is by chance, really. People get to hear quickly if you're making a film on the grapevine. Obviously actors, when we put casting calls out, they gravitate to us naturally, but it's surprising, really. If we are resident for a while, which is usually not long in our case in a particular area of the UK, we kind of get to know people, and then word gets around that you're making a film, and then various people have popped up. Not always what I would call film professionals. They're not always full-time film professionals. Often they have an interest in film, or they're enthusiasts or students or graduates from university who are looking to develop their portfolio in the film business, and then we get involved that way. Occasionally, depending on the budget, we will hire people as well. So it's been a gradual process to get to know the network in Britain, which is pretty small. Almost like a cottage industry over here, the indie film business. People will say otherwise, perhaps, but compared to America, it's pretty small.
Well, I actually think that no matter where you live, the community for the filmmakers wherever you happen to be is always going to be a little smaller, because it's a very unique field to get into, and it takes a lot out of people. You got to get up at 3 a.m, be on set by 5 so that you can get, call times are crazy. And then the next day you find yourself in a completely different location, but you know what? You're going to start at, 3 p.m.
That's right.
So it's a little nutty, and you're working 12 to 14 hours a day, a minimum of 12 for the most part, especially in the heat of the production. You have to troubleshoot. You have to, there's so much in that I think once you find your crew, right, your people, they kind of stay together. But a lot of people sort of fall off the edge of the cliff on it later. They think they want to do it, and then they get some experience and go, this is definitely not for me.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, actually, because I think over here sometimes it's a different culture over here. Really, you forget how different we are. It's just over here the fact that you've just mentioned those crazy hours and 3 a.m. and then the next day 3 p.m. or whatever it is. is the reality often of the film business. And I think you know that latest episode with Tom Cruise I think he was filming in Britain actually, and he kind of went off on a rant about some crew members. Yeah. And you know, I think when you're working all hours and it's a big project, there's a lot of responsibility, or even a small indie project. You know, the pressure creeps up on you, and it can be quite intense. And these things happen. You know, I mean, I'm a pretty relaxed person on set generally, but there are moments when it can tip you over the edge, and you have to be careful. But the culture, as I was just mentioning, in Britain is not always accepting of the harshness of the business and the flexibility required from cast and crew. You know, some people in this country, I think, want to tie it down into a very formalised kind of almost like a 9-to-5 job. But my view on that is that the nature of putting a film together just doesn't lend itself to that kind of mindset. I think you have to be, you know, like the mobile filmmaking crowd, very, very adaptable. And it's almost like a passion. I wouldn't say that you have to be obsessive about it, but I think you have to be driven in a way that you probably might not expect until you give it a go, you know. And then once you get the good thing about all of this is that once you get a taste for it, you then want to do it again and again. And I think there's been a few films. Well, a film called Do Something Jake, which was just shot down the road here years ago. It was kind of a zero budget film, literally. It wasn't shot on a phone, but there was one point where it was freezing cold. It was in the evening. Everyone wanted to go home, I think, or wrap the shoot, I think, on a Friday. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was on my hands and knees in dirt, and everyone else was crawling around in this old abandoned building trying to get the last few shots. And
that sounds awesome.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I was enjoying it, but I could see that some people were flagging somewhat, and I said, you know, does everyone still want to be in the film business? And this really great guy called Nathan Iffel piped up and he said, well, we're still here, aren't we? So, you know, we all had a laugh about that. But there you go. You know, it's that when people talk about passion, I think that's what it is. You have to, you must do it. You know, it's just not a case of wanting to do it. It's something inside you says that you must do this.
Well, there's you know, for people who are not used to it, right? They go on the set and they see the crew and they think like the crew must be, you know, sniffing coke or on speed or something because they can't understand the energy. But that energy is driven by the passion of making things happen. Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't advise snorting coke and or smoking weed and all that. But I think I have had crew members and I dare say cast people who are definitely on something. I wasn't exactly sure of the substance, but
well, that's what I'm saying is like it sometimes it seems like they are on drugs.
Yeah.
Because you know it's like that superpower, you know, of the heat of the moment, you know, where the adrenaline. That comes out, and a lot of people just don't understand that, and it's not a drug. The drug is the passion. You know, that's where the energy comes from.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've done a lot of kind of extreme sports in the past. I use the word extreme advisedly, but cautiously, because you know there are some fantastic extreme sports athletes out there that do the real thing. But I've touched on the area, and I guess I could say that I was a bit of a adrenaline junkie for a while, and I guess when I moved, I suffered various injuries and just basically had to deal with various things that, you know, precluded me from going windsurfing or, you know, skiing off precipices for some time. So I was looking for other things to occupy me in a physical sense, really. And strangely enough, filmmaking is an intensely physical process as well as a mental one. And I think that's something that does fill the gap, if you see what I mean. I think it kind of is a buzz. There is some adrenaline going, and strangely enough, we had I remember a crew member on about after a few hours of the first shoot, he was tired and obviously struggling, and then the second day he was a bit better, and the third day well, he was flagging again, and then finally he had a couple of days off and went off to do some other easier video shoot, I think. But strangely enough, we got a call saying, I just can't wait to get back on set, because what happened was when he was away doing this other video shoot, it wasn't as intense, quite boring apparently, and he couldn't wait back to get with us. So there's an example of initially when you're going through the hardship, it feels bad and worrying, and actors get insecure, and they're trying to just get through it, and there are all those worries and concerns. But I say to people, just hang on in there, and you will find that you will get through it. But you have to kind of remain professional, even if it doesn't seem like a professional production. Hang on in there, and you will benefit later on. But it won't be easy. I don't think many film shoots, if they're of any substance, are easy. They're just not.
Oh no! I mean, the slogan that I always use is that you have to have a backup plan for the backup plan, and then a backup plan on top of that, because everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and you need to count on it. But you still plan, and you kind of know, but there's always that thing that happens, and it's like puzzle pieces, you all have to move together.
Yes, I think it is teamwork, really. I mean, I never really thought of myself as a team player necessarily. I'm the sort of person that's quite happy sort of sitting in a room all day reading a book or playing the guitar or going for a walk on my own, I'm also very happy amongst 50 people, and maybe if I'm in charge of 20 or 50 people, that's fine as well. So I think you kind of get used to the environment of filmmaking, which is very diverse, and you might indeed find yourself, sometimes on a shoot, it'll just be Caroline and me, and we'll be sitting, be in this large building with only the two of us getting an establishing shot or doing something. And then the next day we might be with 20 people. You just don't know. So you have to be versatile. And as I say, somewhat driven in this crazy business.
All right. Okay. So you're driven. We're talking about driving now. Let's talk about driving yourself into the smartphone film, the first one, Cyberlante, because I remember from a conversation with Caroline that like you said earlier, something fell through, and then you found yourself with this wonderful location, right? And then she decided, she was writing the screenplay as you were shooting it.
Yeah, it was a disaster, really, because the first shoot was completely abandoned, really, because I call him the director of photography, but I think that's maybe too much of a compliment, because it just didn't seem to be able to get his acting.
Let's just call him the camera guy.
Yeah, the camera guy with the camera. But yeah, he went AWOL, and Caroline and I just remember the day now, or the night now, sitting in this big building that we'd hired. So I'm saying to Caroline, we're going to have to pull the shoot, we're going to have to cancel this. Disaster, really, because it was complex, and there was a lot of actors, some of whom had flown from Europe and other places to take part in this. That's how popular the filmmaking is. People are really into it. So anyway, we didn't really have a contingency in the form of another DOP, and that would have been difficult anyway. You can't just slot people in that easily, especially when the budget's very low indeed. So it was at that point that we just started thinking about changing our whole philosophy, using a phone and being extremely flexible. So we developed, Caroline, in about the space of 3 or 4 days, put together a fresh screenplay, and then, which wasn't fully complete, obviously, we hired some other actors in a completely different variant of the film, and then started shooting it on this phone, which we'd acquired from Amazon. It came in the post, and then I set it up, and in its basic form, without any real attachments apart from a stabilizer. And we started shooting as Caroline was filling in the areas of the screenplay. I mean, halfway through filming, we were still saying, how's this film going to end? Or at least, do we need any more actors to come in? So, yeah, I mean, it's a great story looking back, but dare I say, a little bit stressful at the time.
Yeah, but I think actually, you had the experience of making movies before. What was the difference between that, and having to substitute a phone camera for a traditional camera?
I think in some ways it eased the pressure of having to it basically resets, if you like, your mindset into having a more simple filmmaking philosophy, which is not a bad thing, because we basically just had the one lens that was the default lens in the camera, and so there was no lens changes required. We needed to occasionally use what's called an ND filter, which was used outside to bring the lighting level down within the camera. But apart from that, it was basically just a story, and a little bit of lighting embellishment here and there if we could manage that. But it essentially changed the whole way in which you prepare a scene, shoot it, and then move on to the next. It basically sped up the whole process and changed the nature of the film. I think it's an interesting one, and I think a lot of people should make films with mobile phones. Can't get the word out, because it's a good sort of way of bringing things back to basics, and then looking ahead to saying, okay, well, I've learnt that from the phone, and now what are the other tools out in the trade, and do I even need to use them? Because a lot of filmmakers will be staying with this format, I think, because of its versatility and certain sort of look that it gives. So I think with Cyberlante, it perhaps helped us to produce a film and not be too ambitious, because maybe the original version wasn't going to happen anyway. It was perhaps too ambitious, and it's always a problem with Caroline and I. We start with a fairly simple idea, and then we get excited. Before you know it, you've got a Spielberg movie which you're trying to shoot.
You went to make a cookie and ended up with a wedding cake or something.
That's right? A beautiful way. Yeah, it's a beautiful way of saying it. Yeah, yeah. We need to remain at the cookie level.
The cookie cutters. One of the challenges with the phone sometimes is with lighting, and I don't know if you guys, because your camera guy took off with the camera, did he also take off with all the other equipment as well?
Yeah, they just he had a buddy, this guy, and they just I actually said, I don't want to work with you at the end of the conversation, because what he was trying to do is trying to say, well, I don't want to have my name against this as the cinematographer DOP. Yeah. So there's a level of snobbery there, and he said, but I'll be okay to be the camera operator with my friend. So, I immediately said, that's not going to happen. I'm certainly not going to pay you, because we were paying these guys. And they came back the next day. A few heated words were exchanged. They got their gear and went. And I think it was a good idea that they went quickly. And then we started regrouping immediately, Caroline and I. And they actually, the other crew members that we had, including a cool guy called Dom Russo, who was doing the sound, the boom operating and helping us with a number of other things, was disappointed. But luckily, a few days later, I said we might be back on shooting on a phone, and he was straight back in and helped us again. But I think there's an example of there is kind of a bit of snobbery in this country, I think, about this way of filming, and I think we need to catch up with America in that sense. It's a strange thing to say, but people seem to think of a camera as some degree of status. It's been the case for far too long, and I think I just say, well, what acquisition format are you using? It's better to leave the word camera out, because if you strip back the filmmaking process, you're basically just recording an image on some kind of format, whether it's electronic or celluloid or whatever, So this is an experience that has taught me to, persevere and work with the right people, and the right people won't really bother what you're shooting it on, or what it looks like, as long as, they're happy with the project and get a good feeling about it. Indeed, the actors often have been very, very good, because they don't care what you're shooting on as long as it's happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. In my world, mobile filmmaking, it's like, oh yeah, of course, but in outside of that, there are still a lot of people in the industry and students who, will shun away from it, at least for now,
Yeah, definitely.
until they're forced to not do that because they really want to make a film, and the budget's not there, and they find themselves in a situation where they go, you know what, let's just go for it.
Yeah, that's right. I think there has to be a point whereby you have that reality strike you, where it's just not going to happen, and you've got to make it somehow. Caroline and I have had this a number of times with our films. We've been delaying and waiting for some quite big finance in the past, and often it's not forthcoming. And, the money that is said to be about in the industry often isn't, or it's difficult to get, or it goes to the same people, almost like a preferred supplier network here in the UK. You can see the channels through which it goes, so which I'm opposed to, and, in a lot of cases, and I have been vocal about it, but I think you just then have to say, okay, well, how can we move on positively from this? And that is to, get up and make a film with whatever camera you can get. Luckily, the smartphones now are really excellent, and it comes down a little bit to what are you trying to do, because very often an audience's perception of what they call production quality and the visual side of filmmaking is very different from producers and sales agents and people actually market Hollywood films and other independent films that are shot in different ways. So it's very interesting that when we released Cyberlante and actually some of our other films, people were saying, well, I wouldn't know or care what that was shot on. I just like the film, and they actually like the cinematography. Well, they call it cinematography, but I guess it is on a phone. But it didn't feel like I was a cinematographer when I was running around a field in the freezing cold and in the mud and everything. But it is. It's just a different way, and the audience often do not know or care what the camera format is, how it was shot. They're just really interested in those characters, really interested in the story. This is not to say that everyone should in some way diminish the idea of having, exquisite production values and great lighting. Some of those things you see on Netflix and Amazon, even the TV series, are incredible. They've spent millions. But often, surprisingly, they just don't work, or they become boring because they're too perfect, And I think that's always been niggling at the Hollywood kind of style, or the Hollywood philosophy, isn't it?
It's the business. It's turned into such a business where it must have the ROI, right? The return of investment, which is, in case somebody didn't know what that was. And so, that's the freedom that you get with the phone, where you owe nothing really to anyone but yourself and your crew. Let's not, forget about that, because, I've worked on films. It's like, whatever happened to that film, And, the thing is that because you don't, there's been so many instances. First of all, just to complete a film, you've already succeeded, right? Because there are many films that get started that never get completed. And, in your situation, congratulations, because you turned that, I love it. I love the story behind that first film and the other one as well. But the thing is that, you have that freedom. You don't have the funding, the people who funded it that you owe money to. And that's, I want to talk a little bit just for a minute about the way you're funding this next film. It's not a mobile film, but I want to talk about that. But it's not like this mob type of a person who's like a loan shark who just gave you this money. It's like, well, you're going to have to do it this way and that way. And I want, you got to have Pepsi or something in here because they're the ones.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it ruins the scene, you know what I mean? That kind of a thing. But you have, and I want to talk about that because I think that's really cool. And our listeners are probably going to love this, that you don't, even if you need the funding, you don't need the funding in that way anymore because now you have a community that can submit the funding for you in pieces, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that same experience anymore. It sort of appears, or it seems like from what I've seen, a lot more interesting and creative. And you get more out of that. Can you share a little bit about your funding campaign and your new film, even though it's not mobile? That's okay, guys. It could be.
Yeah, we haven't started shooting yet, so you never know. Yeah, I mean, crowdfunding was something I was never that keen on years ago, and we tried a few small projects and didn't really succeed in the campaign. But it was Caroline who persevered. Once again, Caroline to the rescue. So, there you go. I wasn't keen on mobile phone filmmaking, and I wasn't keen on crowdfunding. And now if you roll it on a few years, Caroline persevered, changed my mind for me, and now we've got some quite successful things happening, using those techniques. And I think crowdfunding is great because, as you say, it's a different way of first of all, building an audience so that people are interested in the project, and who will hopefully later invest in it more by buying the film or watching it or just supporting it generally. And then also you're not, as you alluded to there, you're not tied in financially. It's almost like having a mortgage, isn't it? If you find a lot of money from an investor or someone like that, then you basically, if someone gives you $500,000 or £500,000, you've then got to go and produce a film and find a way of making that money back. Now, in crowdfunding, the agreement is a little bit different in that you have a responsibility to deliver certain things, but there's not that huge pressure and formality that is required with large finance. And also it makes things possible from a grassroots level. Often when you approach finances or related people in the film business, you need to tick a number of very big boxes before you can even get through the door, or they'll even respond to your email. I don't like that side of the business, to be honest, and they filter people out through various means in the UK. You have to already have had a film distributed and signed by a major sales agent and all these other things, and you have to have a named actor or three. But with crowdfunding, you say, right, I want to make a film. This is the deal. We need so many people to buy DVDs or become associate producers. And this is what we're doing with our next film, Casting Kill, which at the moment we're going through our first crowdfunding campaign with that film, and we're about 40% funded at the moment, which is not bad, for production. And then we just keep going until we get that money, and then shoot the film, and then there are ways then to post-produce the film with other crowdfunding campaigns. So it's extremely flexible. It's very good for mobile film making type projects, I would say. So I think if you're struggling to make a film and you do need some form of money rather than just shooting it for nothing with your friends or something, then it's definitely worth considering.
Well, and you should, because yes, you have a phone, but you should have that serious side to you because you are developing and producing a product in the end. It is something that's tangible in the end, even if it ends up online and not on a big screen in a theater, especially with considering how things are going today. You do have a bit of a responsibility. And if you bring your friends along, right, you kind of want to, I mean, you don't just want to give them pizza and say, that was fun, goodbye, and nothing comes out of it.
Yeah, sure. I think, you've got to, it's like, I learned this years ago. It's like, if you don't take what you're doing seriously, then you can't expect other people to, and I think when you, in the creative world, it's all very well to say, well, let's just have fun, eat some pizza and shoot a few scenes. And then, often these films don't ever get finished, which is a shame, because you never know. You might think, well, it was when we were filming Cyberlante, there were, dare I say, times when I felt that I wasn't quite sure where this was going, or what we had. It was difficult to know whether the quality was going to be good enough for anyone to watch. Not just, you can't just expect your friends and your mum to watch it. You've got to get a lot of other people, if you're serious about what you're doing, to like this film. And when you're making a film, often you don't feel right about it, but you've got to put that aside and keep going. It often will feel weird, and you might look around on set sometimes and people maybe they appear bored, or they're not taking it seriously. But when you're the driving force behind a film, or the director or the producer, you have to keep going. And you never know what people are thinking, because sometimes when actors are goofing around on set and not, you think, oh, what's going on? They're not really taking this seriously. There's usually another underlying story to that. Often they're very nervous, and you think, blimey, that person was nervous. Later on, people were saying, God, I should have identified that. But people do strange things when they get nervous or anxious about the challenge of acting or being on the crew or whatever, and you have to be aware of that. And just because you are holding a small mobile phone and it doesn't appear like a Hollywood film set, doesn't mean that people are taking it very seriously. So what I'm getting around to is that if you're going to do it, you've got to do it, and you've got to do it in a committed way. And you don't have to be all, serious and stern or anything like that, but you do need to have a certain level of professionalism, regardless of what you're shooting it on. So, that's how we got through the films that we've made, is we just keep going, basically.
Well, it can be fun to work hard. And speaking of that, what happened with Surveilled? Because that was another thing, right? Something happened there, and it sort of froze you. Like, what are you going to do now? And of course, Caroline came to the rescue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was
you want to
Caroline again saying, let's make another one, I can't quite remember the sequence now, but
so I think you started with a pixel, which is the same one that you used for Cyberlante, right? Or maybe that's what happened after, or you started with a different one, but then something broke in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's right. You've reminded me now, because I forget these things. There's so much going on. But the interesting thing is we started filming Cyberlante on the Google Pixel, or the original version of it, and I thought, well, this is really good, and the images are really sharp, and we were checking it, and it all looked great, and we wrapped the film. That was all good. But it occurred to me when we started shooting Surveilled that none of the images, none of the scenes in Cyberlante were particularly dark. It was all fairly brightly lit, or indeed outside in the daylight, whereas Surveilled was a much darker and subdued look in places. And what happened was we were starting to have huge problems with film noise, grain, basically, unsightly. It was just unusable footage that we were getting in some of the darker shots. I have a feeling the phone might have updated its software as well to exacerbate the problem. But anyway, it ended up that we were unable to shoot anything in even slightly dim conditions. So also we had a situation where we were using an anamorphic lens attached to that phone, which had a certain housing, and that meant that we couldn't easily just change the phone, go and buy another one, because
Right.
we had this housing that was specific to the lens, a bit complicated.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I decided to do was we said, well, we've got to have another phone. We can't continue like this. So we sort of mid shoot changed format and started shooting in a HD 16:9 aspect ratio, which is more standard kind of format, whilst waiting for another phone and housing to be delivered for the anamorphic lens. So essentially, we had to change phones, and when people see the film, I don't know whether they'll pick it up or not. Again, it's about this audience perception, whether they recognise these technical things. The film is actually a mixed format of some shots HD 16:9 and the rest are anamorphic, which is a kind of a stretched widescreen kind of look.
Yeah.
And it's I think in some ways it's a big learning lesson, that really, and also a story of having to be flexible and not panicking, just continue the shoot. You're shooting in another format. It's not the format you want, but will the audience know or care? And they probably won't, as long as you make sure that you attain a certain quality, and also make sure that the acting is good, etc. So yeah, it was just a real filmmaking dilemma, really. I think using that format, but luckily these days, if you do have a problem, you can look around and say, who's got a phone, and then swap it over, and that was happening, that can happen.
So what lenses did you happen to have, if you don't mind sharing?
On Surveilled, we had a moment anamorphic lens, and that was it for that particular shoot. So this was another sort of philosophy that you have when you're shooting, is there are no lens changes, basically. We had the problem that we had to shoot in the 16:9 format, but other than that, when we were fitted out with the anamorphic lens, that pretty much stayed on the camera, and I actually kept it in the case with the lens on, in case we had a problem with the fitting of it. There's all sorts of these things that you start worrying about. If the Allen key for the lens goes missing and you just take it off and you can't refit the lens because you haven't got the key, then you've got all. So basically, I always directing is about thinking about what might go wrong. That's what you do, and I always thought, if you keep the camera with the same lens on in the same box, it all organised, and then you bring it out the next day, do the same thing, and then put it back at the same thing, then hopefully you'll be all right. But in addition to the lens, we had a kind of what they call it, a lens ring fitting, and a variable ND filter, which again is used to, as I described before, is used to moderate the light levels going into the camera. And you could turn that. It's quite a good device. You can turn it, and it varies the amount of light going in without you having to play with different ND filters. And again, it's saving time. So a lot of things that they're making with smartphones to both in the software and the fittings that enable you to work quickly. But it's a different kind of way of working. Really, it's not the same. There are,
and all the equipment is so small that you fear. When you have larger equipment, you have the cases to put them in, and everything. And so it's, in a way, it's easier to keep track of things. But these little, the little lenses and the fittings and the little things for the smartphone are so tiny.
Yes, I think it's a much more intricate process. And I think the older school, if you like, older generation of people who might not, come into this easily because of that. I do like a more manual way of working with the old lenses, where you just put the lens on and you've got a focus barrel and buttons and switches and things like that. But when you come onto mobile phones, there's a lot of fiddling with small screens and, as you say, small fittings and attachments, which you need to be quite dexterous with your hands, and also in the heat of the moment, or actually in the cold of the moment. If it's freezing cold, you've got to try and operate a very small app on the phone, in the heat of the moment, trying to get things in focus.
Oh my gosh, yes. Not only that, updates on the app.
Updates, yeah, that's right. I mean, and also people might call you. I've been in the middle of a shoot, and I think my mum called, which was totally my fault, because I should have, obviously had it on another setting. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way. I mean, way of working. I think things will maybe turn around a bit, and because things are quite intricate and seemingly complex. But I think they need to be a little bit perhaps more user friendly in terms of working with problems. So with the more traditional camera format and the various lenses, you can quickly hit the focus and turn a dial, do this manual operations on the body of the camera or the lens, and it immediately has an effect. But with a mobile phone, you have to be much more careful not to hit the wrong setting, or sometimes the app would crash, for example. Whereas in a traditional, old school cine film camera, you wouldn't have the camera crashing. You'd have other problems. So,
yeah, I would not want to be a software developer for the camera, the stuff, because a lot of times it's not actually the app. There's an operating system and other apps that can interfere with it and cause problems. But my pet peeve is to put things in my pockets and then forget that I put things in my pockets and start looking for them. Or looking for the camera phone, right? And you happen to be talking on it at the same time.
Yeah, you can't imagine. I mean, that is just crazy, isn't it? You can't imagine someone with a big camera. Where's the camera? That would never happen on a Spielberg set, would it?
No, that's a scene worth having in a mobile film just for the giggles, as they say.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And then they have to call the hire company to get another camera, and then suddenly they realise that
where's the camera? I'm talking on it. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some ways I think there are great things about smartphone filmmaking. I should continue to do it because it's going to develop and get even more exciting, I think. But there are some definite downsides that you have to look out for. Stress points, I guess you'd call them, in that. What happens if, as you were saying, these other apps on the phone or the operating system suddenly change themselves, and then that affects the software that you're working on? Maybe crashes the app, in some weird way because some other app has updated itself. This kind of thing can happen, with software, and there's about 100 million permutations of what might go wrong, which will keep you up at night, for 2 weeks. But when it is a serious consideration, because when you've got 10 people standing around all looking at you, and you're saying, "Oh dear, the phone has crashed. What am I going to do?" That it's a real issue, and they're not going to be too amused if they've travelled long distances.
Well,
and
the
that's
good thing
problem.
about it, though, James, is that now that we just had this conversation for listeners. Don't just bring one phone on set. Remember the backup plan to the backup plan?
Yeah. I mean, that is so true. I mean, on Surveilled, we did actually borrow my friend's phone. This guy called Johnny Kinch, he was one of the actors who was helping us out. I said, can we use your phone for a few days? And we did end up doing that, and so in the morning, I'd set up all of the, got me laughing about this because it was so ridiculous, but there I was setting all the lighting up and getting the actors in place. And then I had to go downstairs to get Johnny's phone. He was making a coffee, and he had to mute it and make sure, all his emails were answered and everything. And then we'd sort of attach it to all of these other gadgets, and I'd give it back to him later in the evening. And isn't that crazy? And then the other... My phone eventually got delivered, and then we swap over to that. So, I mean, Yeah, I mean, if you think about a big film shoot, though, they would have to have contingencies. If you've got an Arri Alexa for many tens of thousands of dollars or more, and it goes wrong, you have to have a backup plan. They use hire companies though, so the responsibilities are shifted, and there's less pressure in that respect.
I do remember being on a set, and it was the last day of shooting. And I'll never forget this, where the AD had, so something happened to the camera, and it was a Panasonic something, and something happened to it. And the AD said, "Oh, that's fine. I happen to have the same camera in the trunk of my car." It's like, really?
Yeah.
I thought he was joking, and he comes back and he says, "Yeah, I actually do."
Yeah.
But it happened on the last day of the shoot. It was just crazy.
That is amazing, isn't it? I mean, you hear these stories, but we're getting into a world now where maybe everyone's got a phone, and potentially, everyone's got a camera, a high quality camera that they're carrying around in their pocket. So does that make us all filmmakers and cinematographers? But I think we're getting to the point whereby if the quality and the versatility of smartphones increases, are we in some way diminishing or making cameras almost expendable, whereby it is a case of, you get all the other things in place and set up the whole film shoot and say, oh, by the way, has anyone got their camera? We just need that final element to slot in, and it almost doesn't matter what the format is. Of course, I exaggerate, but I think because there are many different ways that you can use cameras and lenses and formats and all that kind of thing. But I think it does mean now that the landscape has changed in terms of who is able to make a film, and more to the point, who has access to the equipment to make the film.
Exactly. And the thing is that it's all about the story, really, and the storyteller making a film, and knowing that, hey, I want to make a film. Hey, I actually could give that a shot, like, pun intended, and make a movie, if I really wanted to somehow. And, you've got the power of Google, you got the power of social media, you got the power of funding campaigns, and you're an entire community on Twitter. You can follow James. You can follow me.
Yeah,
just to get started.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I think it's just wide open now. And I mean, some people are saying on social media that, maybe there's just too many films and it's just going the wrong way, and maybe there should be more gatekeepers who filter out certain kinds of films. And this is the nasty business that we're in that people judge your film, judge you, what you're shooting on, and all that kind of thing. And then you have all sorts of gatekeepers and problems within the industry of getting your work noticed. But I always sort of look at the music industry and as a kind of a weird, different comparison, and it hasn't really affected the fact that everyone can record an album, or everyone can, make a music video and all that kind of thing. It hasn't really affected the music industry adversely. I would just say it's different now, and this is the same with the film business. It's different, and it will make people at the top more scared and insecure. The traditionalists will find that things will shift like they have done in the music business. In my opinion, I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's a level of intimidation that some of the people in the industry have had, where it's like, no one can make a film but me, really, and my few people here. You have to know this, you have to use this, you have to do all this stuff, and you have to have all this money, you have to have this camera or that camera, that gear. You have to know all the little details and things like that. But I had a guy when I first started this, when I first launched this, and I put it on LinkedIn, out there.
Yeah.
And he messaged me. He says, "Are you kidding me?" He says, "Are you telling me I spent 35 years of my life to get to this point? Are you telling me some punk on a skateboard can make a movie with a phone?" And I was just like, wow, I didn't even think that you would be insulted by me bringing this up. But
oh yeah, you get that all the time, don't you? I mean, it's like you insulted his very existence. So I think those sort of institutionalized kind of traditionalists are, they're misguided really, because and again, I come down to it's a form of snobbery, and what you've got to do is you've got to be very tough mentally to deal with this kind of negativity, which will appear all of the time.
I did offer him a 6-pack of beer if he could go ahead and shoot with the phone and make a movie. Sort of got him in a better mood, but I do see a little bit of that going on social media, where someone will ask a simple question and a few people get on there and kind of get intimidating, about the suggestions of how you must use this and do that, and start using a lot of terms that the average person doesn't really know about. They're just trying to make a movie with their phone.
Yeah, I think a lot of snobs in the film business use technology as a shield, as a kind of a defense mechanism. But, as I was saying before, a camera is a camera, and, it's all about storytelling. And, this thing about the technical side of things, I mean, people are really, really into cameras, and they talk all of this technical jargon all of the time. In a way, that's it's almost like their very status is built on the technical side of things. But in art, and because we're in the business of art forms, you're creating art forms that people can sit and watch. You need to step back from all of that, and I think that's why very often you have directors who don't have technical knowledge necessarily. I think it helps if you have a degree of technical knowledge for various reasons, but you need the director position is one of good directors, I think, stand back from all of the technical worries and concerns that everyone will have. You can get camera guys onto a set, and they will start working, and inevitably they will find all sorts of issues, no matter how simple your scene is. You just got a guy there smoking a cigarette and saying his name. They will say, "Oh well, I'm not sure about the light, and maybe you should stand over there." And that suddenly your very simple scene becomes an epic that will require 5 days to shoot. So the director's job is to say, "Don't worry about it. That's simple. There's a few problems there with that plane flying overhead and the sun going into the clouds, but it'll be fine. And we need to shoot it pretty swiftly and then move on to the next one." And that's a common thing. I mean, if you don't have that authority when you're producing and directing film, then your film shoot will probably take 3 years rather than 3 weeks.
Well, yeah, I've been on sets also. I mean, there has to be a strong bond between the director and the DP, because they are really one. They're what they're accomplishing is one goal together, and their communication has to be pretty tight. But they do sort of sometimes have to walk away from the set together to argue and come back together, and then
that's great, isn't it? Like the stories of what goes on with DPs, and even some of the top DPs have been fired from a shoot. It's astonishing to think that that's actually the case. But for me, it's about trust, and it's not just the DP; it's the rest of the people as well that you're involved with. And I've only learned this recently, really. I mean, I talk as if I'm some great director who knows.
Is it because of Caroline? What you just said?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting to the nuts and bolts of this, isn't it? That Caroline drives most of what's going on, and I'm just sort of, a rabbit in the headlights. But no, I think really, I think trust is the main thing. So there are DPs that I've worked with who I just couldn't trust. As soon as my back was turned, they'd change the lens or do something else without my consent, and then there's, well, I'd say there's one or two that I've worked with who I really, really trust. Those people have gone on to do some pretty big films, actually, and I hope I'll be able to work with them again in the future. But I tend to operate myself now, unless we're doing a big project, and so I direct and operate the camera for that reason. I can kind of trust myself, but there's only probably 2 or 3 direct DOPs out there that I know and trust, and it's not unusual. I think even big directors tend to work with often the same crews and sometimes the same kind of actors, so it's all about trust, and when there's so much at stake at whatever budget level, you really need to trust those people. And of course I can trust Caroline 100%, so there's no problem there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it comes down to integrity, and that's something, listeners, when we're talking about building your crew and your network and working with people together and the responsibility of all this, you want to build on your integrity. You want to have that reputation. You do want people to say, oh, you'll want to work with, so-and-so because I trust that person and I know they follow through and I can, they're honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the more I get into this game, the more I feel that it's kind of like a life story or life experience, and without sounding melodramatic, I think you learn so much about people within filmmaking and smartphone filmmaking. I think it's a real, Caroline and I keep saying that this is a journey which, our story must be told, probably in the form of a book or hopefully a film, when we've achieved something that we're moderately happy with in terms of distribution, and we've had a film out there that's been perhaps critically well received on a bigger level than we've done so far, then at that point I think our story, which has been traumatic, I have to say, in places, will come out, and we'll be happy to tell it, because I think it will be of use to a lot of people who feel insecure about art, making films, putting themselves out there, because you put yourself on the line. People will criticize your work ultimately, and I say, people that come on to I say I'm not your enemy and Caroline's not your enemy, but we're all friends here and we're all trying to do the same thing, because the enemies will appear later on in the form of critics, in the form of other jealous filmmakers who have some kind of agenda against you, and then of course you get all the wonderful people as well. But you have to prepare yourself for the reality of the film business. It can be nasty, and so when you meet people that you can trust, and when you work with great people, as you found out, Susie, I think with your podcast festival and filmmaking, you kind of stick and gravitate to those good people, don't you?
Yeah. Well, and it comes back around to where we started, just to bring this back into a circle. The intensity of the work, the hours that you work, the hard work and the hours that you're putting in to create something together. No one wants to see that fall through. One little piece here can blow the whole thing. I mean, just one light bulb, you know what I'm saying, can blow the entire film, if you think about it in that way. And so in that sense, filmmaking is a very intense journey in a way that you explained it. And so, if you're going to go into it, you might as well just use the phone and owe nobody anything. And if you fail because you decide, this is not for me, you've hurt no one.
I think that's really sensible. Yeah.
Walk away.
Yeah, I absolutely think that smartphone filmmaking is what people should be doing. I mean, I don't understand in film schools, so people have come out of film school in Britain. I don't know what they're teaching them, but first of all, they should teach them to shoot just a simple dialogue scene on their phone, just without any props or anything like that, without any lighting necessarily, and just try and get the actors to stand in the right position and then see if the scene cuts together. But often people have come out of film school not able to cut a scene together. They're too worried about the lighting, too worried about different lenses, too worried about Stanley Kubrick or other directors and how they would do it. And I think the phones enable you to, first of all, get started and do a basic scene, a basic composition. And that's the beauty of them. And this will improve people's filmmaking, and they don't have to go through that sort of rookie student filmmaker kind of thing. By the time they've practiced enough, without spending any money, you should be able to do the basics reasonably well, and that's the beauty, I think, of
it's
smart.
Great how you can just like shoot something and you see it's like looking through a window. You see exactly what you're gonna get. Then you go through it with somebody and you go, that really sucked, and so you just delete it and start over again.
Yeah, that's right. Imagine if you're shooting on 35mm cine film.
Yeah, you got to go through the dailies and developing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, even if it was 8mm, like years ago, those little cameras. My father used to have one. It's still a process. You've got to get that film developed,
the high 8.
That's it. Yeah, it's amazing.
I was a media manager, so I had to deal with a lot of old camera footage and things like that, just to create one simple film. Because I was also in video production.
Right.
Like you guys were. And sometimes, your client comes over, well, my kid shot something with this and I shot something with that. And you're like,
yeah, multi-formats.
Put it all together, it looks horrible. That's
right. There's so many different formats that you can shoot in, but and then there's the video versus celluloid debate and all that, and now the smartphone versus standard camera body debate and all this kind of thing. But if you look at it as, again, you step back from it as a director or as a filmmaker and look at it with the perspective, you think people are talking and discussing about silly things, really, because the audience, when they sat in that theatre, they're interested in those characters, and yes, the lighting.
If you know how to cut it together, and it's all right. Into transitions where you go, how did that work? How did you shift this from here to there and not make it loud, if you know what I mean, in your mind?
Absolutely. I think some of the best films that you see are quite simple in the way that they're cut together. As I say, one of the things I really try to do is is to simplify things and be wary of people who try to overcomplicate anything, because this isn't a complicated business, really, in my opinion. I think it has its complexities, but we're not sending people to Mars. I think that's a much more complicated exercise. And,
wait, sending people to Mars is complicated?
or trying to sort out the kind of scientific and medical aspects of the coronavirus. I think that's pretty complicated. But so people basically just keep your feet on the ground when you're making a film. There's always going to be someone on set who pops up and trying to make things sound as if we are sending people to Mars, but actually you need to silence those people pretty quickly, because they'll only slow down your shoot.
Well, this has been such an awesome conversation. I really do welcome you and Caroline to come to San Diego. I'm down to give you guys the best tacos in the world, which live here.
Wow. Yeah, you're on, definitely.
Yeah. And I know a lot of places where we can shoot. I know just about everywhere in San Diego that you can think of that can make some pretty cool locations, especially out in the outer areas that nobody knows about.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, so you're our contact in San Diego. I mean, we're very can-do people, and I think we're already excited about it, and we will come out there. I think there's so many interesting things about that area and its kind of similarities to southern Spain that we know quite well, and I'm also excited about filming out there. Smartphone filmmaking, I think, would be a good thing to do, not only with our interest in what you're doing and our collaboration, but also because of the light and the different kinds of things, the culture and everything that we can capture without spending huge amounts of money or closing roads. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes. And actually, when we filmed out in the mountains out here, because I used to live out in the mountains, and the only notice what we had to do was basically I called the sheriff's station, and I said, so we're going to have two older women, sorry, don't want to insult anyone, but they were in their 70s, and they were going to walk down the little road with literally holding AK-47s.
This is getting better, yeah.
And they're going to get chased by a horse. And they're like, what is this for? And I said, well, because we're making a movie. They're like, yeah, all right, okay.
Wow. Well, that sounds
and that
good.
was that. Now we know so that if somebody calls, that's really the whole purpose of it. If somebody calls and says there are two old ladies walking down the street with an AK-47, they'll be like, yeah, that's okay. They're filming,
Wow. You guys must be pretty laid back over there.
Yeah, in some ways,
you don't see that every day, do you?
Not like you guys. You guys are all uptight out there, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, I think if I walked down the road here with an AK-47, there'd be helicopters, and they'd cuff me and all that.
Well,
especially now.
Especially now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I think it's people are a bit tense here, but I think we will kind of get through this gradually. But it is a bit bizarre at the moment. But again, I'm standing here thinking, well, okay, I've got this smartphone equipment with that anamorphic lens in the loft, and I'm now wondering about maybe I should get out and start filming something.
I think it's a good time for people to start document. This is a once in a lifetime. Who knows? It could be 120 years before anything like this ever happens again, and it could be a good time. I mean, to just get out there and film stuff, and then film yourself and document. Do like I Am Legend.
Yeah.
Like Will Smith.
Absolutely. I think there's for people who want to do documentaries or something related to that, I think it's certainly a unique time.
Yeah. But, and even if you don't, you have it for yourself, and you can always look back on it, and then maybe your children or your grandchildren or somebody else might want it and do something with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's no point as filmmakers sitting around waiting for the pandemic to end, because we don't know when it's going to end or how it's going to end.
Yeah.
And those camera phones are sat there waiting to be used, aren't they, with the Film It Pro app? And
let's go make them. We got the time.
Yeah, that's right. Let's go and do it.
Well, the only last thing that I want to do is just for you to give an inspiring message to our listeners. I'm laughing because it's like, well, you were definitely not expecting that. But if you could do that for our listeners, that would be wonderful. And then you can go about the rest of your day.
Yeah, well, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and talking about it, which is not.
Appreciate you.
Well, it's not early, in terms of the film business, but an inspiring message. Well, I think, it's difficult to say. I think in terms of filmmaking, the show must go on, and you have got the ability now with the smartphones to make a film, and even though it might not be easy at the time, going out or maybe doing a bit of documenting your experience or coming up with some kind of creative idea, as I keep saying to people when they're making a film, you just keep going, because when you keep going and then you look back, you think, actually, that wasn't bad. I actually did that. I filmed that. I've got the footage. But if you do nothing, then that also will be the case. You'll have nothing to look back on. You'll have no footage. So it's great. You've got the ability to do this. So go and do it. If you have got a smartphone, you don't have to necessarily. If you just want to do it for yourself, then do that. But there's a lot of benefits that may be difficult to define sometimes that you can get by just creating stuff. And with this new technology, it's all there. So I hope that inspires people anyway. I mean, it's inspired me. I'm going to have to go and film something now today. I'm definitely going to have to do that.
Definitely. Well, give everybody your Twitter. What is your Twitter?
Yeah, it's J Smith Writer. That's Twitter. I think that's the same for Instagram. And then also the company is at Raya Films for Twitter as well. So.
Well, we're going to include that in the notes as well, of course. And then we'll also, just in case someone would like to, be a part of your crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah.
We'll include that there for...
Yeah, so Casting Kill, we're hoping to shoot that in somewhere around February, March, if it all goes well. And it's at Casting Kill on Twitter and Instagram.
I don't know where you came up with that name, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was. I think people, when they see the film, they'll understand where that came from.
All right. Say goodbye to our listeners.
Well, thanks for listening. Support the SBP podcast with Susie. It's fantastic, and get filming. Thank you.